less than I'm making this year. When things get better, it's the other way around, because they'll have to pay more based on the more they're earning in that year. Right?
I think they'll be happy to pay more during those times.
This is why companies in general have not favoured this. We have another approach, which is what we put into place a few years ago, and I enhanced it in this budget. Companies who are making a loss can get back cash based on tax paid previously, and I've extended that to the previous 3 years. So it'll do more than what you wanted. Because a loss-making company is actually not only is it going to be not paying tax, it'll be getting cash credits from previous years. And I think that's not a bad way of riding through the recession and catering to the cyclical element of the tax system. And for individuals, those who might unfortunately have lost their jobs, we're extending the time they can take to pay their tax to 24 months. So we'll be flexible about it in practice. And I think it's neatest administratively, the present system. It's neutral across the cycle, and it's not worth making a major change unless there's a really compelling reason, and I haven't seen it.
Okay, just a quick thought on the loss. Maybe David and Rennie will listen, from the SME's perspective.
I think that is very important, because as far as we are concerned, I mentioned earlier on about liquidity problems of companies. So this will make cash available to company. Anything that brings cash is welcome today. Definitely more than welcome. But if you don't mind, I'd like to go on to talk about another subject. And Minister, why is it on the property tax rebate for industrial and commercial property, why do you make it payable to the landlord? Why not pay it direct to the tenant? Because in the past, some landlord kept it all and just some gave parts of it away. Yeah.
Well, simply because it is administratively complex to give it directly. We don't know how much tenants are paying. They'll have to declare. We'll have to compare it against what the landlord is claiming. Many landlords are also occupying the property themselves. So unless you want the tax authority to pay everyone more than what they're supposed to get, which no good tax authority should want to do, it involves checking. And I think it's quite burdensome. Secondly, there's some merit in letting the market work. There's a lot of extra space that's coming on the market this year, particularly the retail side and commercial side. I think the market is going to lead to rental adjustments. Government has taken the lead. JTC, HDB, the SLA, NEA as well, are going to offer 15% rental rebates to their tenants. That's much more than the savings in property tax due to the 40% rebate. So we're taking the lead, and we urge private landlords to also consider how they can adjust their rentals in the light of this very severe decline in demand.
Yes, Minister, that is definitely welcome also on the rental rebates, because we also hope that, as you say, influence the commercial, the private owners to also bring down their price of rental.
Okay, on that note, we'll just leave the discussion there for the moment. Hello again, you're watching a special forum on Singapore Budget 2009. Here in the studio with me is Finance Minister Tharman Shanmugaratnam, and also my panel of guests. Halimah Yacob, who's from the National Trades Union Congress, Dan McHugh from the logistics company DHL, Song Sing Woon from CIMB GK Research, David Ong, chairman of the Kreta Ayer Kim Seng Citizens Consultative Committee, and Rennie Yeo, president of the Singapore Manufacturers Federation. Thank you so much for staying with us. Minister, if I can just launch off this part of the discussion. The budget was, of course, trying to address some of the longer-term issues, enhancing the competitiveness of Singapore's companies as well as the economy. To what extent do you think the budget today is going to try to, give that extra boost, if you like, to Singapore companies when they come out of this recessionary cycle that the economy is facing?
Well, I'd be happy to hear the business views. We've tried to shape this so that there's a significant incentive for companies to see the downturn as an opportunity as well. An opportunity to invest, to refurbish your premises, to spruce up, to prepare for recovery. And the opportunities are looking around for opportunities even in the crisis. So the accelerated capital allowances that we are introducing, the corporate tax rate cut, and some of the grants that we are offering for capability development are all oriented at the long term. If you look at the budget as a whole, despite it being a crisis budget, about a third of it is really aimed at the long term. It's for recovery in the long term. In a normal budget in Singapore, given our instincts, at least 80% of a budget is long-term. So we had to bring it down, obviously, because there are severe short-term cash flow needs that need to be addressed. But still, 1/3 of this budget is aimed at the long term, not the short term. And I think that's important for us to signal to our businesses and signal to the world, our businesses and signal to the world that Singapore is going to be around for a long time ourselves and the competition.
All right, let's bring in some of the company views. David.
Minister, we were looking for a much bigger corporate tax cut, though. I'm just thinking that for the 1%, because I just want to make sure that the pipeline of foreign investment continue to flow through Singapore. I think if we are able to reduce the corporate tax to such an extent where we can come quite close to Hong Kong at 16.5, probably that could to Hong Kong at 16.5, shrinking by half according to a report from EDB. Maybe you can have some kind of explanation for that 1% instead of 2 or 3.
We will keep a close eye on corporate taxes, for that matter, personal income taxes, The feedback we get from businesses is that at 17% we'll be in a very strong position, but we'll watch it over the years. Nothing is set for all time. We've got, as you know, many other incentives besides the headline corporate tax rate that are quite useful in incentivizing companies to locate and grow business here, particularly if they're offering something new by way of technology and innovation, and particularly if they're hiring people and paying them well. So there's quite a few incentives besides the headline tax rate that we rely on.
Yeah. Actually, Dan would have a thought on this one.
I think that's a very powerful statement. Singapore is trade dependent and is very dependent upon the U.S. consumer and the European consumer over the past few years. And I don't think the U.S. consumer will ever return to that type of hyper-consumerism that we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years. And so Singapore has to adjust its sources of demand. And that's through innovation, and that is through development, and that is through increasing competitiveness, vis-a-vis other Asia sources of multinational location. So I'd like to ask the Minister, in terms of the incentives that we would see, not just in 2009, because businesses have to think 10, 11, 12. Will we be able to see these type of incentives so that Singapore can permanently change some of those sources of demand?
Minister?
Well, we think we can be the most competitive place for R&D and innovation and for a whole range of corporate businesses that are in the high-value space. We think we can be highly competitive there. We already are. We probably need to do some things more in future years if our revenues permit, and that depends on what happens to the overall economic situation and what else we have to spend on. For this year's budget, despite very pressing short-term needs, we decided we should go ahead with a corporate tax rate cut. It helps companies who are planning for the future, but it also sends a signal about the type of government we are and what our thinking will be in future.
Minister, why not front load the tax cut? I think David was talking about. Why just 1%? Are you saving it for off-budget measures subsequently? I mean, wouldn't it be better to say, okay, let's bring up the bigger guns, not all the guns, but all the big guns certainly at this juncture here, and then we'll calibrate it subsequently rather than the other way around. Yes, we got some big guns certainly, but like tax cuts, and the rebates appear small. I think my point here is that we are not poor. I mean, if we look at all the government around the world, like Norway or whatever, we do have a sizable consolidated surplus itself. So I think it's probably exaggeration to say we are spreading it a bit thin at this juncture here. So, we would certainly, I think, appreciate a bit more of the front-loading bit, and then, subsequently, it's, more fine-tuning rather than the other way around.
Could we do with a bigger bang, in other words? Minister?
Well, it is a big bang, but,
I would...
tax front, especially.
I would prefer to wait until we are fairly clear about our revenue position next year and the year after before committing to further tax cuts, permanent tax cuts. In the meantime, we are doing a lot. We have sent a fairly clear signal, I think, in our conduct over the last 6 or 7 years as to where we see taxes going. Very few countries have reduced taxes by as much as we have over a fairly short space of time. So they know what to expect. They know that if our revenues are in shape, we will have certain priorities, and those priorities are focused on competitiveness.